Have you ever felt like you were living a life that looked perfect on the outside, but inside something felt deeply off? Maybe you've spent years overgiving, overachieving, prioritizing everyone else, and suddenly you find yourself asking, who am I now beyond the roles I've played? What do I actually want outside of what's expected of me? Is it too late to rediscover my desires, my pleasure, my purpose? If any of this resonates, then this episode is for you. Welcome to Pleasure in the Pause, a podcast dedicated to empowering midlife women to feel more connected to their bodies, pleasure, and power through perimenopause, menopause, and beyond. I am your host, Gabriella Espinosa, women's health and sexual wellness coach, and it is my pleasure to be here with you today. As we celebrate International Women's Day this week, we honor the theme for all women and girls: rights, equality, empowerment. This year's theme is a call to action to unlock equal rights, power, and opportunities for all. But for so many women, midlife brings the realization that before we can stand fully in our power, we must first reclaim ourselves. Because true empowerment isn't just about breaking external barriers, it's also about breaking the internal ones we've been conditioned to accept. That's why today's conversation is so important. I'm honored to welcome Vanessa Cornell, a teacher, thought leader, and masterful space holder who helps women reconnect with their deep inner knowing. Vanessa's journey started at Harvard and Wall Street, where she built a life of achievement and success. But after a decade of overachieving and raising 5 children, she hit a breaking point, deeply disconnected from herself and searching for something more. Since then, Vanessa has devoted herself to creating spaces where women can explore who they truly are beneath the layers of conditioning, expectation, and perfectionism. She founded Nushu, a women's community dedicated to deep connection and self-discovery, and now leads transformational groups, courses, and retreats that invite women to listen inward, trust themselves, and honor their truth. In this episode, we're diving into some of the most important and often unspoken shifts that happen in midlife. How to hold space for yourself in a world that constantly asks you to give. The shift from mother to wise woman and reclaiming your desires. Navigating midlife friendships, why some evolve and others fall away. Giving yourself permission to want what you want and how to figure out what that even is. Because the best kind of self-love, it's not just bubble baths and affirmations. It's giving yourself permission to want more joy, more depth, more pleasure, more of what lights you up. This International Women's Day, let's remember that empowerment starts from within. When we give ourselves the right to reconnect, to desire, and to step fully into our truth, we create a ripple effect for ourselves, for our sisters, and for the next generation. Midlife isn't the end of something, it's the beginning of the most honest, liberated, and powerful chapter of your life. So if you're ready to step into this next phase with courage, clarity, and pleasure, let's welcome Vanessa Cornell to Pleasure in the Pause. Welcome, Vanessa, to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so looking forward to this conversation. I've been following you on Instagram for a while and following your story, and I think it's one that so many of us will resonate with. So why don't we start there? Your journey of self-discovery began with what you describe as a painful rupture in your life. Can you take us back to that moment and share what it revealed to you about yourself?
In a word, I had been sleepwalking through life, I realized. And that was the first 35 years of my life. And it had been characterized by, and I tell this story because it's so common, not because it's special. It had been characterized by decades of being extremely successful in fulfilling external expectations of who I was supposed to be. I was an overachiever. I was friendly. I got along. I did everything I was supposed to do. And I got all of the trappings associated with that life. I went to Harvard, I went to Goldman, I had all of the things that one would think you would want to check off your list if you're climbing the ladder to happiness, right? People think, okay, when I achieve this thing, or when I get married, or when I have children, or when I get the job, or when I'm financially secure, I will be happy. And what was interesting was I had all of those things and I was desperately unhappy. desperately unhappy and desperately lonely.
Mm.
And so there was a major rupture. It was very messy. And what I realize now in retrospect is that it was the voice inside of me that knew that nothing in my life was allowing the actual person I was to be present in it. It was all about who I was trying to be for other people. And that voice got louder and louder. And I was really good at tamping it down. I was really good at ignoring it. I was really good at suppressing it. And then at one point, it started screaming really loudly and it got really messy. And it just couldn't be quiet anymore. And I think this happens to a lot of women at this kind of stage in life, and people call it a midlife crisis. I don't know. I think we need a rebrand on the midlife crisis. I'm not
Mm.
sure if it's a midlife crisis or a midlife awakening, that everything we've been doing has been suppressing this kind of inner voice that says, but what about who I am? But what about who I want to be in the world? And so that happened to me, and it was painful and it was difficult. But what emerged from that is a lifelong journey to discover, yeah, who am I? Who do I want to be in the world? What is my place in the world? What is it that I'm supposed to be? And it's been like a technicolor journey where life was black and white before. That's the best
Mm.
way I can describe it. The amount of creative energy that I have, curiosity. You talk a lot about pleasure. The amount of pleasure I have in almost everything I do has been only as a result of that rupture and the realization that really the only thing I think I'm here to do is to figure out who I am and be as much that person as I can possibly be.
Mm. Thank you so much. Yeah, I know that it's in some of those darkest moments that we truly discover who we are. We try to push away those dark moments, see them as dark. They shouldn't really be called dark. They should really be called light because that is when the light comes in.
But let's be honest, they can feel really
Yeah.
dark. You can feel like you're walking through a tunnel of fire. So if
Yes.
you're they don't call it a dark night of the soul for nothing. It's dark in there, but it's a passage that has to be passed through sometimes for some
Mm.
people, and it certainly was for me.
So, what steps did you take to come out of that place and find yourself again?
Yeah. It's interesting. People will ask, did you have a teacher? Did you have a therapist? What did you do? And what I think that my process is, I actually have an incredibly curious mind, which I didn't realize before this. It kind of got unleashed. And so whenever I see something new, I love new ideas. And so I would follow it to the ends of the earth. So I listened to podcasts and I read books and I learned from people. And I just got so curious about my inner landscape. Nothing had ever been as interesting to me as my inner landscape or the workings of the human being, why we do what we do, how we're motivated. And the person I had the most access to was myself. You can learn about other people and look at their inner landscapes, but I had access to my own 24/7. And so I started really just noticing everything about what was happening inside of me. And that continues today. I've got a TED Talk in my head every morning about what's going on with me and what I noticed and what's coming up for me and what's surprising. And this is just the way my brain works. But really, I got very curious. I got very focused on learning as much as I could. And that's how I emerged from it, as well as tremendous support from my husband and forbearance from my husband and my family. And at the time, I had 5 small kids. I have 5 kids, I had them quickly. I had a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 6-year-old. It was bananas. While I was curious and thinking through this, I also just had to get through my day. And there was a lot of tension there because part of me was so excited about this new world I had discovered inside that all I wanted to do was learn about it. But I also had kids to take care of. And I realized quickly that the easy way is to go sit on a mountain in India and contemplate
Mm.
life. The harder thing is to have a life of contemplation inside your life, inside your responsibilities. And I realized very quickly that's actually what was meant for me. It's so much of the work that I do with women now is to say, okay, how can you do this inside your life? That's the harder thing. How can you live a really conscious life inside of the reality of just stuff? We're not running away from it. We're not making it go away. It can be really hard, but it is possible. It is possible to craft an intentional life, a life that works for you, a life that allows you to be you inside of your responsibilities, inside of the people that you love. And I think a lot of times people feel like it's one or the other. It's
Mm,
me or them.
yeah.
If I'm selfish and I take care of myself and I figure out what I like, what I enjoy, what works for me, what a me shaped life looks like, I'm going to have to take something away from the people around me. And part of my journey has been to navigate that where I've realized that's just not true at all. My children's lives are enhanced by the fact that I do not compromise my life to the point of self abandonment. My marriage is better, my friendships are better, everything is enhanced by it. And so I think that this path back to a life that I'm creating for myself was navigated through the structure and framework of the people I loved, the responsibilities I had, and the life that I had chosen. Because part of me, when I was in this place of, oh my gosh, I've completely lost myself, part of me thought, it's all wrong. I just want out. I married the wrong guy. I live in the wrong city. I have the wrong life. I shouldn't have had children. This is what was going through my head because there was something so fundamentally misaligned at that point in my life. I was like, it must be my external world. It must be all the people around me and the life that I've chosen. This is not the life for me. It was not the external world, it was the internal world. And when I started to really focus inward and figure out who I am and what I like, I realized that, oh no, not only can this external world accommodate me, but I get to show up more powerfully, beautifully, able to give from a place of love, not obligation inside that world.
Yeah, so beautiful. I am hearing you speak to this identity, right? The importance of maintaining your true identity beyond the roles that you play: mother, wife, business owner, space holder. And yeah, it's really difficult to stay connected to that self beyond those identities. How do you stay connected? What advice do you have for our listeners who are grappling with the same? Who am I beyond these roles that I play, that I'm expected to play?
Yeah. So, one of the main tools that I use is I ask people to ask themselves, do I even like this? And what do I like? Who am I is such a big question.
Mm,
But what do I like is also a really big question because a lot of us who have been trained to take care of other people, to do what's expected of us, to do what we should do, have been trained out of asking ourselves the question, what do I like? What do I enjoy? That's why I love that you put pleasure at the center of this podcast because the disconnection from pleasure, the disconnection from joy for a lot of women is real. And joy is often thought of as the destination after you've put in the hard work and the sacrifice. Once I work hard and I put in the sacrifice, then I am entitled to joy. Then I am entitled to pleasure. Whereas I really think that joy is a guidepost. Joy is really a way of saying, should I go this way? Should I go that way? Do I want this? Do I want that? And so, in little ways, and I'll give you some examples, we have decided that's not something we have permission to want.
mm.
So, I'll give you a small example with my kids. My kids love to play games, they love to play board games, and I don't love it. I don't love it. You pull out the Monopoly. I'm supposed to be like the fun mom. Sure, I'll play Monopoly with you. But the truth is, I'd rather poke my eyes out. I just can't stand it. And so I talk to so many moms who have babies or toddlers, and they feel so guilty that they don't enjoy certain things with their babies, where there's this image of the mother who's supposed to just love every moment with her baby, and they don't. And there's a lot of guilt associated with that. And what I say is, don't feel guilty. You're a human who gets to like certain things and not like other things. Lean into the things you enjoy. So I say to my kids, no Monopoly, definitely no Settlers of Catan, but I will play Bananagrams with you because I love that game and it goes really quickly and I don't have to remind you whose turn it is. I get to be a person who has preferences, even with respect to my kids. And so I get to be tapped into, what do I like? What do I not like? Like, I'll play games with you. If you want to play that game, play with your brother. If you want to play this game, I'm your girl. Whereas I think that there's this image of self-sacrifice that is glorified in motherhood, where it's, if you want to be a good mother, you must have no preferences. You're supposed to enjoy every aspect of it. And the truth is, if you poll a bunch of mothers, that is just not true. Some people love bath time. Some people hate bath time. Some people love reading at the end of the day. Some people hate reading at the end of the day. So I think that just to give yourself permission to have preferences, to give yourself permission to even acknowledge what you like and what you don't like, and that identity does not eclipse your preferences. You have to show up as you and what you like. And so I think this idea of finding things that light you up, finding things that you enjoy, and the opposite of that is denying what lights you up, denying what gives you joy. And that is when you start feeling like you're putting one foot in front of the other. And I'm not saying that you have to enjoy every aspect of everything, but if you never allow yourself that, it becomes one foot in front of the other, which I think a lot of women can relate to. With
Mm.
a lot of responsibility.
Oh my gosh, the board games. Oh, I've been there, so I feel seen. I thought I was the only one. Oh my gosh.
No, I
And
can't.
then there's a thing where for me it was like, okay, dad was the one who went in and played the board game. So he's seen as like the good guy because he's always game for a board game and they have so much fun. Right. But yeah, for me, it was like, okay, I just can't do this. And I felt guilty about it. So guilty. You speak a lot about mom guilt
Mhm.
and how perfectionism shows up in our parenting. What advice do you have for women who are still caught in this cycle, even as their children grow older? It's something that grapple with too. My kids are in college now, and it's still there. Do I need to be there for them for this? Or how much do I step in to make their lives as easeful as possible?
Yeah. The thing I would say about mom guilt is that we lump everything into mom guilt. Everything that feels uncomfortable with respect to our children, we lump into, oh, I feel guilty. Something is not ideal, and I feel guilty, as if, as a mother, it was our job to fix everything and make everything right. So,
Mm,
first of all, it's not our job to fix everything and make everything right. And in fact, by protecting our children from everything that's uncomfortable, we are setting them up to not have any resilience in the world because, as we know, being a human is hard, bad things happen, and it's tough to be out there in the world. Paving the way for them to avoid all discomfort is no service to them. The other thing I'll say about mom guilt is that a lot of times people will lump everything into mom guilt, and I have one tool to really help distinguish what is guilt and what is something else. The something else is fear, mom fear. So when I think about guilt, I think about being guilty in a court of law means you have done something wrong to hurt somebody else for which there is required repair. So the question I ask myself when I'm feeling guilty about something is, have I done something wrong that I need to apologize or repair for? Have I hurt my child in any way? And sometimes it's true. I'll give the example of, I've had a really bad day. My kid does something not a big deal, and I fly off the handle and I yell at my kid. And I go back later and I say, that was really not nice that I yelled at you. It had nothing to do with you, it had to do with something else. And I wish I hadn't done it, and I'm sorry. So that's a very appropriate use of guilt, right? Guilt is that feeling that we get in our bodies, which is really useful to say, hey, I think you did something that you shouldn't have done, and maybe you need to go make it right. The problem is we're lumping all sorts of stuff into mom guilt. Oh, I feel really guilty that I haven't signed my kid up for the 3 classes that somebody else has signed them up for. I feel really guilty that I'm spending 2 days away from my kid. I feel really guilty that I work and I'm not there for this pickup or that pickup. And you have to really ask yourself, is your kid being hurt by this? Does your kid say, Mom, go have fun on your 2-day weekend? Like, I'm fine. I don't need you. I'm not upset about it. Is your kid upset or are you upset? And what happens is it's not really guilt, it's fear. If we really go down the entire rabbit hole of fear as a mom, and this might be relatable too, In my mind, it's if I don't sign my kid up for those 3 classes that everyone else signed them up for, then maybe I'm not giving them the opportunities that the other kids have. They won't make as many friends, they won't get into the right school, they won't go to college, and then I'm all the way down till they're homeless on the street in my head, right? The rabbit hole is going all the way to homeless on the street from mommy and me class that I didn't sign them up for, right? And so what really happens in our head is this fear of I'm a little bit worried and scared because I love my children so much of
Mm.
all of the things that could happen to them that could hurt them or could be hard for them. And so let me try to control and do everything I possibly can to make that eventuality never come true. We want to control a good outcome. I just want my kid to be happy. We want to control a good outcome for our children. And we do that through doing as much as we possibly can to make ourselves feel like I've done the thing that's going to avoid that bad outcome for my kid. And the truth is, and we all know this, we don't have control. We are trying to create an illusion of control. And that's what the fear is about. It's the fear of an unknown future. And so much of our guilt is actually fear. So much of our
Mm.
guilt is maybe if I just do more, maybe if I'm just around more, maybe if I wasn't working, I can avoid a future that hurts my child. And we cannot. And so the tool I really use for mom guilt is does it require repair? Was somebody hurt or not? And if not, then it's not guilt, it's fear, which is
Yeah.
real. But let's call it what it is and sit with it for what it is and determine is this a fear that I can do something about? Is there something I need to actually do to protect my child, put their seatbelt on? Or is this a fear that I can do nothing about and I just need to sit in and recognize that the future is unknown, which is not fun, but it does make us less frantic and less exhausted because we realize there's a lot that we're doing that is not really effective to
Mm.
preventing an unknown future.
And sitting with that fear, as you said, is uncomfortable. We really have to, I feel, come into this space that you hold so beautifully, this holding space for ourselves. You created a modality,
Mhm.
holding space, a group course, which is designed to help people become more present, more compassionate and grounded in themselves and in their relationships. I love this concept of holding space. Can you share a little bit more about that concept of holding space for oneself and what inspired you to create this modality, which is now a course, a facilitator training? And what are some of the transformations you've seen in the women who go through it? Because I think it all comes down to that, really. How do we hold space for ourselves, for our true
Yeah.
selves?
Yeah. I'll start with holding space for other people. Holding space in my mind is very simple. Holding space is the ability to just be with somebody in their experience without interfering, without jumping in to fix, without jumping in to soothe, even. An example of this is your child comes home and they're upset about something and they tell you about it. And rather than saying, I'm going to go talk to the teacher, or the teacher was wrong, or your friends are wrong, or you shouldn't feel that way, or don't cry, or don't be upset. They said those mean things about you, but you're such a nice person and we love you. All of those things are meant to soothe your child. But sometimes your child just needs to get it out. They just need you to listen. Mom, I don't need you to tell me what's going on, who was wrong, how to fix it, what we're going to do about it. I just need you to listen to me. And the reason I did the course is because it's such a powerful skill and it's so underutilized and it's really hard for us as mothers.
Mm.
And what I really teach in the course is that when you're trying to soothe your child or when you're trying to fix their problems, what you're really doing is soothing yourself. What you're really doing is trying to make the discomfort you feel at witnessing their discomfort go away. And while that's completely natural, that isn't what your child needs in that moment. Your child needs you to be so steady to say, I can sit with you in your discomfort. I can let you be uncomfortable. Because if you're not able to do that, what your child will do, particularly if they're very perceptive, is they'll notice your discomfort and then they'll stop sharing. or they'll make their process stop, or they won't share things with you because they want to protect you from them. And that really sets up a dynamic where your child does not have a space where they're allowed to just feel what they feel, express what they want to express to somebody who they know can hold it. So, this idea of holding space to allow somebody to be really, truly honest in their experience and to have place to go where they know they can be that. And if it's in any dynamic of a relationship, but with a child and a parent, it's like, oh, that's the place I can go to be really honest in how I feel. And having a place like that really allows people from young age to develop an awareness of who am I? What do I like? What's not okay for me? How does this make me feel? Because all of those feelings, emotions are information. But if from a very young age, they're like me, I can't really be angry because it makes other people uncomfortable. And they'll say things to me like, don't be angry. It's not so bad. They shut it down. And so holding space is the awareness of yourself when you're uncomfortable with someone else and having enough awareness to hold that to not shut them down in their experience. It's an incredibly powerful tool for relationships and one that's difficult but can be learned. It's a skill that can be acquired and practiced over time. And I've seen with the women that I've worked with a tremendous transformation in their relationships with their partners, with their friends, with their children, with their parents, with their
Mm.
siblings, where there just is enough space to allow for what's happening to come up without immediate need to jump in, to soothe and to fix, that it has profound impacts on relationships. Now, holding space for yourself, I apply all of these concepts to this idea of holding space for yourself. And what does that look like? That looks like allowing whatever's arising in you to be for a second before you start to judge it and try and make it go away. I was really upset about that, but I really shouldn't be upset about it because this and this happened. And I actually feel ashamed of how I feel about that. So I'm going to shut it down. So there's so much that arises in us that we don't listen to because we don't want it to be true and we just immediately shut it down. And so holding space for yourself feels like, let's let everyone come to the party. Let's let the thoughts that I like come to the party. Let's let the thoughts that I don't like come to the party. And before I shut them down or judge them or fix them or try to make them go away, just let them have a second to breathe. Let them have a second to tell me what they want to tell me. And so there's a lot of self-compassion that goes along with
Mm.
space for yourself because I don't know about you, but a lot of the women I work with have a very active inner critic, have very active self-judgment. We are the cruelest and the harshest to ourselves. And holding space for yourself looks like taking that inner critic and that self-judgment offline for a second. It's a skill that we build over time, but can we give ourselves a moment before we jump in and decide whether that thought should or should not be in our head? The fact is, it is. There's just a truth to the fact that thought is in our head. And we will then take that and make it mean all sorts of things about us. I'm a bad person. Can't believe I had that thought. What about, oh, hey, I just had that thought. I'm not going to decide yet whether I should or shouldn't. I'm not going to decide what it means. I'm just going to hold it for a second. I'm just going to literally hold space, literally create a pause. And then when the self judgment comes up, I'm going to look at that and be like, oh, look at that. My self judgment came up and I'm not going to judge that either. Interesting. And so when I tell you the dialogue in my head and the process from being completely numb and unconscious to conscious looks like a little ping pong dialogue in my head where there's just curiosity comes online. It's, oh, interesting. That's an interesting thought I had. Oh, interesting. I really rushed to judge that thought. Oh,
Mm.
and that made me feel really uncomfortable. I really wanted to go away as soon as possible. Oh, interesting. I reached for my phone to try and make it go away as quickly as possible. What if I just sat for one more second with it to build a tolerance for it?
Mm.
It's not easy work.
Yes, no. That building tolerance, yeah, is what can be so painful because when we're stepping into discovering who we truly are, we have to let go of things. These thoughts, these beliefs that keep circulating on our heads, we're trying to let go of them, right? It comes a time to determine whether we can detach ourselves from what no longer serves us, but from a place of compassion and curiosity, right? Not totally rejecting them, but how can we, I guess, yeah, hold space for those parts too, right? Those
Yeah,
internal
and
parts.
it's so hard because I think one thing that is helpful is that sometimes when we see these patterns come up and we're working so hard to release these patterns and let them go, and then they come up, and then we're like, "Oh, I'm so mad at myself. There it is again." Then we're judging it again. And so I think what's helpful is to say, "We've been patterned for decades in a certain way. We have developed basically survival patterns to navigate and negotiate the world into which we were born and raised. And actually, it's pretty brilliant the way we did it. We have figured out in our family system, the way we were raised, in the culture in which we were raised, how to navigate being a human. But it's decades of training. And how do we think that we're just going to poof, make it go away because it no longer serves us overnight? And so I think about it as the uninvited guest to the dinner party that just keeps coming over and over again. And we can either, when the uninvited guest comes, be like, I can't believe this guest is here. And all of a sudden, we're giving that uninvited guest a lot of our attention, giving that uninvited guest a lot of airtime, rather than just being like, you're not invited. You're not invited over and over again. And just understanding that, like, yeah, no, we're going to have to say it a lot of times, maybe forever. But I do think the more times we're just like, nope, nope, it's maybe that an invited guest is gonna get bored and is gonna eventually be like, "You know what? It's not even worth coming to that party because I'm gonna get turned away." And so I think to release the judgment of, "Oh, here we go again." I have moments where I'm like, "Are we in this place again? I'm so bored of you, imposter syndrome. I'm so bored of you, self-doubt.
Mhm.
We've had this conversation before. You're not invited to the party, but there you are again. There you are again." And to me, I kind of use humor. I have to laugh. I'm like, "Oh, this is hilarious that you're back. This is hilarious. We have done this dance before. We've been at this party before, and there you are again. All right, let's go. Next round." Because I think we do get, again, so hard on ourselves. We default to being hard on ourselves. Can we default to, "Oh gosh, I noticed that coming in again." Like, instead of being hard on myself that you've come in again, I'm gonna be really proud of myself for noticing that you came in again. Every time I notice, I'm proud of myself. And so to just shift the dynamic where we're not fighting so hard, we're really coming from a place of curiosity and lightness and compassion and generosity towards ourselves, it makes hard work a little bit easier.
Mm. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of parts work from the internal family systems where, in this case, you invite all your parts to the party, but you just give them their own little place. Go sit there by the window, have your popcorn or whatever your drink. And I've got this. The self has got this, right? There's no need to worry about me or to try to come out and protect me. I love this modality that you've created because, oh, gosh, those parts of ourselves, those are real. Yeah, we can't just dismiss them or reject them or judge them. And this beautiful dialogue that you have with them, I think is so helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think parts work is super, super helpful. A lot of people, I'm not an expert on it, but I know enough about it, and people who have worked really closely with it, I think it's very powerful for a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Vanessa. I've heard you say we have to give ourselves permission to want what we want. But for so many women, and you spoke about this earlier, it feels impossible, right, to understand what our deepest desires are, especially because we've been conditioned to prioritize the needs of others over our own. How do we begin to uncover our own desires
Yeah.
after years, maybe even decades of putting ourselves last? I speak to so many women, especially at this juncture of midlife, right? Of what is it that I really want? I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. They don't know what they want.
Yeah. It's so common, and it's actually so confronting to people
Mm,
when I say, "What do you want?" And they say, "I don't even know." Right? That's so heartbreaking. That's so heartbreaking and hard. But there is a place to start, and the place that I start with people is to retrain what has been untrained. And I use 3 questions. How do I feel? What do I need? And what do I want?
Mm.
And I tell people to ask themselves these 3 questions, even if the answer is, I don't know. Because I think in the asking of the question, what happens to our system is if you ask me the question, it means you want to know and you care about what I feel, what I need, and what I want. What I feel, what I need, and what I want matters. And so over time, if you start asking yourself this question, probably how do I feel is the easiest one. I feel tired. I feel sad. I feel unmotivated. I feel excited. I feel energized. So, a practice every morning of just saying, like, how do I feel? Let me just check in with myself. And sometimes people are surprised because they didn't even notice how they felt because they just are in override how you feel and go on with your day mode. And so, just this practice of how do I feel today? Where do I feel it in my body? If you even have a physical body scan practice, oh, I have a tightness in my chest. Interesting. We don't need to interpret it, don't need to know what it means. But if you start to tell your body signals, which are very wise, I'm listening, then you're going to start to be able to hear them. What happens when you start to ask yourself, how do I feel? What do I need? And what do I want? Is the inner voice that knows exactly what you need, knows exactly what you want. And what starts as a whisper, and sometimes the answers really are whispers in the beginning. They're not really complete sentences, and it's frustrating to us. It starts often in midlife as a feeling, an uncomfortable feeling, an inkling, something in your gut. When we start to ask explicitly and really listen and really pay attention, those whispers start to get louder and louder, and they start to find their voice. And the voice that has been intentionally quieted for so long starts to trust that you want to hear it. And so it's a process over time where if you ask the question enough and you're open to the answer with curiosity and non judgment, you start to say, like, oh, interesting. I didn't realize this before, but I don't even like going there on vacation. Oh, interesting. And this one's tough. I don't even like spending time with that person.
Mm.
That person doesn't make me feel good. But you don't know that if you're never checking in with how you feel, if you don't have an awareness of how you feel around someone. And so now I'll have moments where I'll have a feeling in my body, I'll have a feeling in my gut, and I'll have to go trace back what it's from. I'll think, okay, what have I done in the past couple hours? And then I'll come across an email that was sent to me where I'm like, oh, it's that. Something off here. And so when we start to ask, there's a lot of information there about what we like, what we enjoy, and especially what's not okay for us.
Mm.
And things start to fall away in our lives. I will talk to people, and I had this session, I had a group session, and I said, what's your intention for the new year? Just a basic question. And someone was like, I really want to really intentionally spend time on the things I care about and not the things I don't care about. And I was like, awesome. That's great. What do you care about? And she was like, I'm not sure.
Mm.
I'm not sure. And so we're just doing things that come to us. And so we are perpetually busy. You know, it's like I live in New York City. So how are you doing? I'm so busy. I'm overwhelmed. It's like we pack our lives full of stuff because we haven't taken the time to discern what we actually want to do. So I have 5 kids and 2 businesses, and I have a lot of free time because so much has gotten cut out. Nope, not that. And so when we start to really understand how we feel about things, we really start to listen, we get really quiet, we figure out what we need, what needs feel unmet. Then we can graduate onto what do we want? What do I want in my life? What do I not want in my life? It doesn't have to be like a one big thing. What do I want? Let me tell you the thing I want. It's more like, what's the life I want? How do I want to surround myself, either with people or activities, or how do I want to guide and create a life that feels so good to me, that feels so right for me, that has things that nourish me and light me up and doesn't have the things that drag me down unnecessarily.
Yeah, those questions. So beautiful. How do I feel? What do I need? What do I want? And do you think from there emerges who am I? Or do you feel it's necessary to determine who am I? You spoke about that earlier, that sometimes that can be a tricky question.
Yeah, no, it is a tricky
Especially
question.
in this transition from like motherhood to as we're evolving into the wise women we are, or we do become that wise woman. How do you make that transition? Do you ask that question, who am I?
I definitely ask that question. I have a belief that when we're born, we have a soul imprint. We have a life that we're supposed to lead. This is literally just my faith, which you can say, nope, Vanessa, not at all for me, or maybe it resonates, but it's not that it's true. It's just my faith, the way I believe. So we have a soul imprint, and I believe that my job is to solve for getting as close as possible to the path of my soul imprint as possible. It's not so much about being like, what am I supposed to do? It's more about over time, little by little, shifting out of what's not meant for me and what I'm not supposed to do. And so to me, who you are is built up by the way that you walk through the world. And when I say the way you walk through the world, every step of the way that you walk through the world. So it's the way that you treat somebody on the street, the way that you have your relationships. And to me, every decision has to do with who I am. Everything that I do, everything that I choose, everything that I don't choose. And I don't mean to put too much pressure on it. I'm actually hoping to relieve some pressure on it because who you are isn't one defined thing. It's the life that you navigate and the way that you walk through the world and all the small choices. And what's great about that is as you learn and as you grow, there's no choice that was wrong in the past. There's just more awareness in the next choice. And so there's no pressure on any step because it's built up of so many steps over your lifetime. And so the only thing you need to do is just take the next right step. Just make the next right decision that feels right and true to you over and over and over again. And out of that, you build a life. Out of that, you build who you're supposed to be. And I do think that for me, the guidepost of joy, who am I, is not some idealized place that I have to struggle to get to because that will somehow make me worthy or good or a good person or contributing. No, I really think that finding my soul imprint has to do with releasing my gifts in a way that feels joyful. So I just recently led a retreat and I was talking to the women about their work in the world and their desire to be of service, which I think is a very interesting way to put it. I want to be of service because to me, there's a little bit of self sacrifice in there, right? It's important to me that I give to others and make a positive impact on the world, possibly at my own expense, if you're an overgiver, because I think that if I am of service to the world, somehow that will make me worthy and a good person. And I said to them, I do nothing to be of service. I do everything just to feed myself. I run this retreat because I find it fascinating and I love being with women in this way and I enjoy it. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it. The second I don't enjoy it, I'm not going to do it anymore. Because the only way that my gift of holding space and being with people is at its peak is if I'm lit up by it and I'm enjoying it. And so I told them very clearly, I did not do this for you. I did not do this retreat for you. I did it 100% for me. Now, underlying that, because people might think that's just license to be selfish, license to just think about yourself. First of all, most of the women I talk to, if there's a scale of selfish from extremely selfish to completely unselfish to the point of martyrdom and overgiving, all my women are over here in the overgiving place. I'm sure that it exists. People who don't think of others, right? There are people who don't think of others, really are selfish. That's not my audience. I'm really mostly talking to people who are such overgivers. And so for those people who really care deeply about other people, really care to serve and nourish and care for other people, what happens is they start to burn out. They are giving from a dry well. And for those people who come deeply from a place of love, what I really believe is to the extent that they can tap into their joy, what they will solve for is more capacity to give and
Mm.
more capacity to love. And so I believe at my true nature as a human, I am love. The closer I get to that nature, the more I have to give. But the way I get to that nature is to say, what do I want? What feeds me? What do I enjoy? And that's really going to allow whatever my gift is that I was given when I was put on this planet to be its most effective and most glorious. So there's a real reframe, I think, for the givers that is possible where we really have somehow decided that to be good and to be worthy, we need to self sacrifice in order to give. And I just don't think that's true.
Yeah, I love this idea of discovering your own gifts within yourself. I've heard you describe them as your own unique superpowers, right?
Mm.
And I think if you embrace your own unique superpowers, you can operate from that. These are my gifts. I decide how I'm going to share them. And I'm not just going to give them all away, right? They're not for free. I decide how I'm going to give them and I'm going to decide how I present them to the world. So it's seeing them as these gifts that you can share. And then back to the original point of what do I want? What do I don't want? I feel that many of us don't know what our gifts are. How did you
Mhm.
discover your gifts? You say your gifts, your superpowers are this ability to hold space for others and to see the good and beauty in everyone. And you find gems and bringing people together, right? That's what you do. That's something that truly lights you up, right? That's your gift, your superpower. How can women in midlife begin to recognize what their gifts are and operate from this place of this is
Yeah.
who I am. These are my gifts. These are my superpowers.
Well, the first thing I think that is really important is that we take down the obstacle of what we think we should. So I have a great example. I have a friend who started an investment fund and she was doing really great and it seemed really exciting. And I was like, I can do that. I can do that. Maybe I should do that. And I started down this road. I was like, I'm going to invest in founders and I'm going to support women. And then I was like, oh, I don't even like this. Just because I can do it doesn't mean I should do it. And the thing that interrupted it, again, I don't even like this.
Mm.
I don't enjoy it. But it seems like it's really good and it's helpful and it's prestigious and I'll get a lot of attention for it and all of these reasons that we do things that we don't even like. And so the first thing is to really ask yourself, do I even like this? What will I receive from this? Respect, validation, a feeling of importance, a feeling of relevance, right? All those things are real and true, and we crave those things. And it's okay to feel that way. But if we allow those things to make the decisions for us, we find ourselves in places where we are trying to get a lot of external validation, and the internal is like, oh, okay, I guess I'll be quiet. I guess I'll just sit over here because what I really want to do you're not going to do for me. And so it takes a lot of courage. I've talked to people who are like, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do this, maybe. And then after many conversations, they'll be like, and there's this novel in my drawer. I'm like, a novel in your drawer. But no, I can't. So we think of all these reasons why we can't. Because also the thing we want the most is the most tender. It's
Mm.
the most vulnerable. If I go and have this job and I fail, okay. But if I pull my novel out of my drawer, because that's really where my heart lies, it's a very vulnerable place to say, I really love this. I really want this. This comes from deep inside of me. I'm going to give this to the world. Whew, takes so much courage to do that. But if we don't ask ourselves the question of what we enjoy, what we like, what lights us up over and over again in small ways, and start to chart our path in that direction, we won't find it. And I do think that sometimes people will say, but I don't know what I want to do. And they think that what they need to do is figure out the end result they want. And once they've figured out that end result, if they're at spot A and the end result is at spot B, once I figure that out, I will draw a straight line from A to B and I will go from here to here and I will get what I want. That is not how it works. That is not how the discovery works. And so I encourage people to think of it as an experimentation. Hey, this seems fun. Let me experiment with that. Because an experiment is really not intended to do anything except give you information. An experiment is just to figure out, like, oh, is that fun? Is that not fun? I've talked to a lot of people who are in job. A friend of mine, she's in a job, a big deal job, but what she really wants to do is interview people. And I was like, great, just go start. Just go do one. See if you like it. You think you're going to like it. You think that's what you want. You think you want a big talk show. Maybe. Do one experiment. It's so low stakes. Go interview somebody with a mic in your living room, then do another one. And so the process of getting to what you want to do is a meandering path of experiments, checking in every time saying, was that fun? Was that not fun? What part of it did I like? Did I enjoy that? And so people say to me, what's your business plan? No business plan. Absolutely no business plan. This doesn't work for certain types of businesses, but it does for me because I see my business as completely just a vehicle for my own personal exploration. One needs vehicles, right? You have a podcast, it's a vehicle. I have retreats. They're all vehicles to experiment with because you got to take the things that you're interested in and somehow make them real in the world. And so through this process of, let me try making this real in the world. How does that feel? Let me try making this real in the world. What did I like about it? You can meander your way to something that you want to do. And I've done a lot of different things and I've changed my mind a lot of different times as I've done this. But this idea that you have to know what the end goal is before you even start to experiment keeps a lot of people really stuck.
Yeah, I love that experimenting, that curiosity, just playing. We get to
Right.
play, we get to want, and we get to have more. I feel if we want right now in midlife, we can have more. We can want. We can play. I love that so much. That's really great advice. Thank you so much for that. I wanted to just pivot for a little bit before we finish and talk about friendships. I
Mm.
love that your word for 2025 is friendship and how you're reclaiming it from you said from the wellness industry version of community. What does real friendship look like to you in midlife?
Yeah. The reason I was so focused on friendship is because I live in this like self-help mental health world. And I was looking around at the self-help mental health world and thinking, we've never been more informed. There's never been more information. And yet people seem lonelier and in more trouble than ever. And it literally was a moment where I thought to myself, a lot of these people, maybe they do need therapy, but the therapy might not be the answer. They might just need a hug from a friend. They might just need a friend to be like, hey, I care about you. That kind of just simple connection. And then I started thinking about the word connection, which a lot of people are using these days and is totally overused. And like connection is let's create a community of people to buy my products. Not necessarily, but it happens a lot. I think what a lot of people need is just friends. They just need friends to be with. And what does that mean? That means people who get to see you for who you actually are in your good moments and your bad moments. And you can feel like, oh, this is a place where I just get to be me. I don't have to be anyone else. I get to be accepted. And girlfriends are fun, right? like we're together in the trenches. We're talking about the latest skincare products. We're out to dinner. We're doing something fun. It's like the idea of friendship being a reclaiming of our ability to be a full range human being in our midlife in the way that we got to be as girls.
Hmm.
It's like there's nothing better than your girlfriends. And so when we start to have a family, maybe, or we have a career and we have a partner, I feel like sometimes that gets pushed to the side. It certainly did for me. And I've had this kind of discovery of girlfriends and friendships, and it feels like a rebirth. It's just fun. It's like we don't even have to be too deep about it. It's like you got your girls in the trenches with you, and we all just need a little bit of that in our lives.
Yeah, definitely. I do find though that women, I hear from women that who find that their friendships evolve or even dissolve in midlife. What advice do you have for navigating these shifts and cultivating true, nourishing friendships? Because you have to start new, like, that new kid
Mm.
in the cafeteria. Sometimes it
Yeah.
feels like,
Yeah, it's really scary and it's really vulnerable because real friendship requires you to show your real self to somebody else. The whole gamut, the whole thing. And that's very vulnerable because if you're showing somebody a version of yourself, a facade, an avatar of you, and they reject that version of you, it's like, that's okay. That wasn't me anyway.
mm,
But to show the real, true side of you is very scary. What I have found, though, is that there's something very attractive about someone who's revealed. People are drawn to authenticity. People are drawn to people who are really true to who they are. And so a lot of times what we are afraid of when we reveal ourselves is that someone will go running for the hills. But what actually happens is the opposite. Is that they're much more drawn to you. Now, this requires discernment. I don't think you tell everybody your whole life story on your first date. And so there's just like with relationships, romantic relationships, there's chemistry. And I think there's dating. Even with a friend, when I meet somebody that I'm like, oh, I think that person could be my friend in the same way when I was dating a long time ago before I got married, I had this spark, right? So there is it's similar to dating where you have a spark. You're like, ooh, I might like this person. And then there's a dating process where, both people have to make similar efforts. You have to test whether the chemistry is there. But here's the thing with friendships, we do make that effort with romantic relationships, but we don't necessarily make it to date our friends. And so I will, when I meet somebody new, I'll make a real effort to show them I'm interested in knowing you more. I wanna know you more. And so I'll make a Zoom date or I'll make a coffee date or I'll invite them to something, and then we can test out the reciprocity to see if it's the same on the other side. It's nerve-wracking in the same way it
yeah.
is when you meet somebody romantically, but it's so worth it. So it requires effort and it requires time, but I think that people don't really think of that as an area in their life that they should dedicate time and energy to, but the rewards are really great.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I've made so many new friendships in midlife. It is just like starting again at a new high school and having a group of friends. And yeah, I've invested my time and effort and so worth it. You've built a beautiful and supportive community through Nushu. This is the group that you've formed to gather. Can you talk to us about Nushu? I love the meaning of Nushu. What do you think is the secret to cultivating deep and meaningful, shall I say, connections or gatherings with other women,
Yeah.
especially in midlife?
Yeah, so Nushu means women's language in Chinese, and this was a language that was shared only amongst women when they were denied education in ancient China. It's almost an extinct language. There are a couple of people trying to keep it alive, but it's this beautiful written language that was embroidered into robes when women left the village or painted on fans in poetry. For me, an intentional gathering of women has been the core of everything that I've done, whether it's in groups or trainings or retreats or even just friendship in my home. And I think the care that I take to gather in a certain way pays off a lot. But the primary premise of the way that people gather is that I create an environment where people feel safe to be who they are and to take off the masks and to actually tell the truth. And the capacity that people have for connecting in a space like that is profound because people are craving it. All you need to do is create the conditions for, and people will drop in so quickly to that place because as humans, all we want is to be seen and known. And so much of my work is to create that environment where there is an explicit agreement among others that we're not going to judge, we're not gonna give advice. We're not gonna try and change anyone. We're just gonna show up with an open heart to know others and to be known. And the magic that can be created in a space like that is profound, particularly amongst women, because it's rare out in the world. to have a space where it's like, you know what? We don't want any version of you other than the version that's the most true. And whatever that is, whatever that comes with, we can hold it without judgment. So the fear of judgment is what I hear the most that holds people back from sharing parts of themselves that they're worried people aren't going to appreciate or like. And in those spaces, we just make a mutual agreement not to judge. What form does that take? I've done a facilitator training where I train people to hold space in group, and I hold groups and I do retreats. But I also really believe that this work is not just for the sake of being in those spaces where it's like you can be yourself in this space and then go back out into the world and put all your masks back on. It's to sort of create a training ground or a place where you start to build trust
Mm.
that being exactly who you are out in the world is viable. And that's really my practice. It's just I will tell you as much of the truth as you can bear all the time. That's just my practice all the time in the world. And so I don't just do it there. I do it everywhere. I do it on. You say, is there anything I can't ask you? No. Like I will tell anybody anything about anything at any time, unless it's not my story to tell. There is a
Mhm.
certain level of privacy with my kids, my husband, my people. If it's not my story to tell, I won't tell you. But if it's mine, I will tell you. And being super revealed all the time is what these modalities and these practices help you do. And so the latest course that I have, How to Hold Space, is really about trying to create spaces to practice this in your real life, in your intimate relationships, to start to build this trust that, oh, the world can hold me as I am. I don't need to curate, alter, airbrush myself for the world. And that being that authentic and genuine in the world is not only viable, but will make me feel alive in
Mm.
a way that I can't possibly feel alive if I'm hiding behind all of these masks and all of this armor. It is important to say that there is a certain amount of discernment required in that. I don't spill my guts to everyone on the street necessarily, and there's a certain amount of what I call vulnerability porn out there.
Yeah.
More is
I love
not
that you
always
call things for what they are.
yeah, like more sordid details is not necessarily being more revealed. Do you know what I mean? I just want to make that clear. It's you don't sit next to someone at a dinner party and tell them like your deepest trauma. That's not what I'm suggesting, you know? What I'm saying is over time building a practice of knowing where those things belong, but being able to notice and check when we're checking ourselves. Notice and check when we're curating ourselves. And little by little becoming more confident in being exactly who we are and having our external world match our internal world. That place
Mhm.
is really alive.
Yeah.
It's really alive. And when our external world doesn't meet our internal world, and I think this happens a lot in midlife for women, where that tension starts to become unbearable. A lot of women who are like, there's something wrong, there's something off. Almost always, it's the external world does not match the internal world. And we've been able to ignore it for a long time, and we can't anymore. We just can't do it anymore. There's something inside of us. The wise woman, the woman who knows inside of us is like, no longer. I will not be ignored.
Wow, that's such great advice. Thank you so much. Yeah, you've offered such beautiful wisdom and insight that I hope our listeners can take with them as they step into this next chapter, having more clarity and more courage to really listen to that inner voice. I love this space that you're creating for these conversations. Can you please share with our listeners where they can find your courses? I know that you're offering our listeners, and thank you so much, access to module 1 of your course at
Yes.
no price. So thank you so much. I'm going to include that in the show notes. But how can they move forward beyond that one module and learn and gather with you?
Yeah, so everything I do is on my website, vanessacornell.com. And everything that I just blurt out and comes out of my head comes out on my Instagram, which is at Vanessa Cornell. That is just my daily way of getting whatever's in my head just out into the world. And so those are really the two places that hold all the things that I offer.
Thank you so much. And as you say, we don't have to have all the answers today, right? We just have to start listening to yourself, to that quiet voice inside that's been waiting for you to pay attention, because midlife isn't an ending. It's the beginning of something richer, deeper, and truer than ever. And today is that we're recording this on Valentine's Day. The best kind of self-love, I think, is giving yourself permission to want more, right, Vanessa? I
Yeah,
know you're with me on this. More joy,
absolutely.
more depth, more pleasure, more of what lights you up. So thank you so much, Vanessa, for holding space for this conversation, for sharing your wisdom so openly. I know this is going to resonate deeply with so many women. And to everyone listening, if this conversation sparks something inside you, if you're feeling the pull to reconnect with yourself, know that you're not alone. You're allowed to change, to evolve, and to want more. And if you love this episode, please take a moment to share it with a friend who needs to hear this. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for being here with us today.
Thank you. It was a joy. I really appreciate you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Pleasure in the Pause. Want to help me spread more pleasure in the world? Hit the share episode button and send it to a friend, or post it on your Instagram stories and tag me, Gabriella Espinosa. And if you really love this podcast, please leave a rating or review, as this helps the show get in front of new listeners. Finally, if you would like to access even more pleasure and stay in touch, sign up for my free pleasure upgrade bundle of powerful mind-body practices by going to pleasureinthepause.com. Remember, your pleasure matters.